and welcome to the Nebraska Writers Guild Author Chat. Tonight we have Sarah Buhrman on the show, and I'm so excited to introduce Sarah. Sarah has been writing for more than 25 years. She lives in the Midwest with two monsters, the kids, an ogre, the husband, and whatever drama-llama is coming to visit this week. Sarah is the author of the Runespells series, including Too Wyrd, Fluffy Bunny, and The Chains That Bind. She has short stories in several anthologies, including Counterclockwise, a Time Travel Anthology, A Twist of Fate, a collection of 11 twisted fairy tales, and Beyond the Mask, a superhero anthology. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you on. So I kind of did a little intro for you, but can you tell us about yourself?
Gosh, that's such an open-ended question.
I know.
I write, and I write weird things that come into my head, and that's pretty much why I go the fantasy route most of the time, because it's weird. But pretty much been writing on and off for my entire life. You know how that goes. I mean, how many writers don't have that story, right?
Yeah.
I've been writing since I was 8.
That's cool.
But so got into English in college, and after a couple of years after that, I just kind of had an epiphany that, oh my gosh, you can actually be an author. Like, it's not just like one of those mythological careers. So, okay.
That's awesome. So you write fantasy, and what else?
Pretty much anything spec fic. So fantasy, sci-fi, horror, paranormal, that kind of stuff.
Nice. And do you write just short stories or full-length novels and all that?
The Runespells series is full-length novels. I write whatever the story calls for. So like if I'm writing for my own purposes, then it's kind of however long the story ends up. I don't try to push it in any way. Short stories, obviously, a lot of them end up being written for specific anthologies. So, there's usually a general topic and a word count that I kind of keep focused on. Other than that, it's, whatever comes out.
That's great. So tell us about your Runespell series.
The Runespells series is, it's one of those things that was a long time coming. I fell in love with the Dresden Files, and I thought it would be so cool if I could do something like that.
Awesome.
And so I kind of had this idea for like a bounty hunter kind of character, because I was also reading, what was that one series? It's the One for the Money.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, kind of combining those two, having a series like that was like also paranormal would be really cool. And I just kind of was tossing around this idea, tossing it around, trying to figure out what the first story would even be. And then I had a dream. And the dream was that I was looking for these pendants that were runes. And so I kind of took that idea and put it in, and it changed the entire direction of the series, but it was kind of cool. So I went with it.
That's awesome. I know I've picked up little bits from dreams and put them in books and stuff. So that's really cool. So what inspired you to become a writer?
Really, it's been kind of a matter of what else would I do with my life. I tend to be really good at a lot of things, but more of a jack of all trades, master of none kind. And nothing really appealed, except that I realized that when people tell me stories, whether it's, a scientific paper or how to install a car stereo or anything like that, I understand it. And then I can turn around and tell other people about it in a way that they can understand. And I was like, that's got to be a skill.
Ah.
And then when I kind of looked into doing like technical writing and things like that. but it was all very dry, and quite frankly, the competition is really tough on that. So never really, found a way to break in. But I realized that there were other stories that needed to be told. And a lot of those stories were stories of disenfranchisement. And my phone is yelling at me, so I'm going to turn it off. And I on social media, I ended up becoming friends with a lot of people who are in minority groups and marginalized groups. And I realized that their stories are not mine to tell, but at the same time, their stories are not mine to exclude either. And making a conscious effort to include people of color, people of minority religions, people of disabilities, all of that into these stories that are usually, let's face it, fantasy usually have white characters. It's usually young. It's usually, it's been skewing towards young women in the last decade, but, it's also very focused on young men.
Yeah.
And so when I started the Runespells series, I was like, she's going to be a 30-year-old mother because, no chosen one here. She's like, I have dinner to make. What the heck? So, bringing those kinds of stories in, bringing in those perspectives, I felt that was something that needed to happen. And I guess, it's nothing faddish, but I think there's a lot of people who appreciate it. So
nice. That's great. We have a question from our Nebraska Writers Guild social media chair, Gina. She said, I love your covers. Do you create them?
The Runespells series is actually done through a small press publisher, and they do the covers, and they do a spectacular job. When I put one of my books out for them to pick up, one of the things that they ask, except here's your contract, blah, blah, blah. Here's some things that we need from you. They always ask for like an idea for how the cover is going to be done. And with the Runespells, I'm like, it has to be thematically the same as the others, because obviously, but here's the kind of colors and symbolism that I was like thinking of. So I think they've done a really good job on them.
That's awesome. So another question from Gina, who is your publisher?
It's Black Rose Writing, and I believe they're actually located in the UK. But they don't like to focus on any one genre. They're very, very open about what kinds of books they publish. And so they're kind of like, if your book is a little more niche-like, I know a lot of people think, oh, well, my book is so different than everybody else. But there are some that are really, really niche. And so they're a really good publisher to go through for that, because they're not going to try and shoehorn it into a specific category like that.
Okay. Nice. So tell us about your publishing journey. How did you get published?
Well, funny enough, I don't like to talk about it because it's like really, people get mad at me. I decided I was going to try traditional publishing before going the self-publishing route for that. And so I had, my lists of, the lists of publishers. You get the lists of publishers that you're going to contact. And Black Rose Writing is, of course, a B. So it was towards the top of the list. And so I was literally, going through websites, looking at submissions guidelines. And the interesting thing about Black Rose Writing is you're allowed to submit through an online portal.
Yeah.
So instead of having a paper slush pile or an email slush pile, they have this online portal thing. And I was like, why not? Let's do this. So I submitted it. I think it was like the second or third publisher that I submitted to, and, just kind of kept on going. And I think it was like 2 or 3 months later, they sent me an email, yeah, we like it. And I was like, you're not going to make me work for this?
Nice.
Okay.
Sign up. Yay. That's awesome. So had you already self-published before that?
I had a children's picture book that I published through another, it was actually a micro press. That ended up being kind of a learning situation because it was essentially this guy who labeled himself a publisher, and it didn't necessarily end up as fortuitous as I would like.
Oh no.
So there, it wasn't a horrible experience, but it certainly wasn't the publishing ideal experience.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from it. I had a few short stories that had been published in anthologies, but of course, that's not the same thing. And I had self-published a collection of poems and then another collection of short stories. So I kind of had a mixed experience with all of that. So yeah, awesome. I highly recommend people get experiences too.
Yes.
You never know how crazy the publishing world is until you get into it.
That's true. It can be pretty crazy. So how long does it take you to write a book?
Depends. I think Fluffy Bunny, which is book 2, took me 2 months.
Nice.
The 4th book is 2 years and counting. So it kind of depends. It depends on what's going on in life, of course. It depends on what's going on with other things. The past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of short stories and anthologies. So, doing 2 or 3 short stories specifically for anthologies a year does cut into the writing of the novels.
Yes.
So, yeah, it kind of depends on what else is going on. And I guess, do you count when it's only on the front burner? Or do you count it when it's on the back burner too? Because that changes things a lot.
That happens. Yes, definitely. So Gina has another question for us. Has the pandemic changed your writing habits?
Completely. I have been working from home primarily as an author, but also as an editor for about the last 5 years. And so I had a hard time figuring out what day it was before. And now that I don't have a children's schedule to monitor, that the whole thing is just out the window. It's like, I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is half the time. It's like, I set a lot of reminders on my phone because otherwise I'll miss everything. It's just, yeah. And then, you decide to, just play one game of solitaire, and 4 hours later.
Yeah. I never do that. No.
Procrastination is a writing technique. I'm telling you. It's when I try to convince myself it's when your brain is actually trying to process the story.
That's right.
Yeah, that's it.
That's exactly right. So what is your writing process like?
I tried to be a pantser and I failed miserably at that. I don't have ADHD, but gosh darn it if I don't have all the symptoms when I try to write. I just go everywhere with it, and I don't know where I'm going, and I have all these really cool scenes that pop up into my head, and then there's like no plot, no story arc, nothing whatsoever. So that actually changed when I took, oh my gosh, her name just jumped out of my head. She's in the Writers Guild.
Oh.
She does mostly screenplays. She's got red hair.
Oh, Lisa Cavanda.
Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that. Her name just scurried away.
That happens to me.
She did the story arc seminar
Yes.
a couple years ago.
Yes, she did.
And I went, oh, really? So now I actually developed from that system a 9-point plot arc that I have to outline that every time before I start, just to give me direction and ideas. And I mean, the thing is, I've never taken it as like being set in stone. Like,
Yeah.
there have been things that happen that it's like, okay, this is a better climax, but I still like the story arc, so I'm just going to shift everything down a little bit and make that earlier in the story and have like a mini climax. And
Yeah.
then, so things do change all the time, but it gives me direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very, very important, especially if I'm going to write within, a 20-year time period finishing a book.
Yes.
So yeah, I need a lot of direction. I need a lot of structure in my writing. And so I try to build that in.
Nice. How detailed are your outlines? I know some writers write pages and pages of an outline, and some just kind of loosely outline.
They're as detailed as they need to be. Like a band travels around the country. Okay, that can be like 2 or 3 chapters, but I don't need to outline like all of the details of that. But on the other hand, like a climactic scene where the girl faces down her teacher, and the teacher points out this, and then the girl has to wrestle with that internally. That has to be more detailed, because that is key to where I'm going with it. But it's not going to take much more writing than what I've outlined.
Yes.
So they're as detailed as they need to be for me to understand where I'm going with things.
Yeah.
You should be able to understand the entire story from the outline, but obviously, it's not going to have any of the descriptions or anything. And, like I said, so sometimes I'll be in the middle of a scene and it'll just go that way. And I'll be like, okay, this is not what I outlined, but this is really good, so I'm going to make it work.
Yep.
So, you kind of, you have to do what works, is pretty much my best advice.
That's really good advice, because everybody's different. All right, we have a question from Shoshana. She would like to know, do your outlines change as you get further in the story?
Sometimes. I mean, it's really unpredictable. Sometimes sometimes I have been so inspired when I do the outline that is exactly how the story goes, and it doesn't deviate that much. And sometimes I'm like, this sounds kind of good for what I'm doing. And then I get into the story and it's like, nope, this is better. And now we have to change the whole thing. So yeah, it's like, it's kind of whether or not I have the brainstorm at the outline point or somewhere in the middle of actually writing it out.
I get that. Totally. Charles would like to know, do you keep notes on characters such as traits?
I have not, and let me tell you something, I regret that. There have been a few close calls where people have changed eye color in the middle of stories. Like, like you're describing a secondary character or something, and it's not really that important, but if you say that they have brown eyes and then all of a sudden they have green eyes, somebody's going to pick up on that.
Yes, they do.
So I do recommend it. And one of the big projects that I would like to do in the near future is to go through all of my books and like just read through them and make character notes, because I try to keep track of the main characters' major characteristics, like anything that you just kind of throw out there in the moment, and then it becomes like something you have to stick with later.
Yeah.
That can be really hard to track, and it's kind of hard to know what that is going to be when you're just typing maniacally, because you found that groove and you're like, hazel eyes, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Blue eyes. Wait, no, hazel. No, blue. So, Yeah, I do recommend that whether you do it electronically, I think Scrivener has a system for that.
Yep.
The program I use, Writers Cafe, has a system for that, or notebooks, whatever. I highly recommend it because you're going to get yourself written into a corner, and then you're going to become famous, and then you're going to have a wiki, and people are going to be like, and between books 3 and 4, the eye color changed.
Totally. Yep. All right, Gina has another question. You have a great sense of humor. Do you use it in your stories?
Ironically, yes. And I say ironically because I tend to write really dark stuff. So my characters have a very snarky sense of humor a lot of the time. Like, in the Runespells series, my main character has an encounter with the devil, like the actual devil. And about halfway through, she just decides that she has no more craps to give. And she's like, okay, Lucy. So yeah, she's got like this really nonconformist, not like irreverent, sarcastic sense of humor. And I think it adds a lot because, like her whole deal is that she does not want to be there.
I love it. That is so great. So let's see. Are you working on anything right now?
That's a trick question. I'm always working on something. I think last count I had 27 works in progress. I am working on the 4th book of the Runespells, the 3rd book of the Hot Fae Night series, which is my erotica line under my pen name. I'm working on a short story. I'm editing a short story, both of those for anthologies. And then I have like a whole series of theoretically standalones, because, they might turn into series later, but theoretically standalones that I should probably get out at some point in time.
Yeah, I get
it. This one that I'm specifically focusing on right now, though, is the 2nd short story.
Oh, nice. So what do you do when you're not writing?
Marketing.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I write and I market and I drink and I know things, and so there you go. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's producing content to send out to people, and whether that's in book format or social media format is pretty much what day it is. So yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. So do you have a favorite book or story that you've written?
Oh, favorite.
That's hard, isn't it?
I really like the way A Time and a Place turned out. It's a short story. I actually wrote it based on a work in progress that I have. So it's a prequel before I actually wrote the series.
Nice.
But in terms of like my style and it coming together, I think SPA is probably my favorite. And that's the superhero short story. Because yeah, it's just, there's a lot of funny in there.
Oh, that's so great. Gina wants to know, do you have a favorite character that you've written?
I don't dislike any of my characters. That's probably the core thing. Favorites? That's, gosh, which one of my fingers is my favorites? I don't know. I really like Mercy and I really like Hound Dog. Ironically, neither one of those is a main character. So, but yeah, the funny thing is, I don't really like my main character in the Runespells series because one of the big things about her is that she has a lot of flaws to deal with, and no joke, some of those hit a little too close to home, and I'm like, no, not even dealing with that.
Funny. So do you have any suggestions for someone just starting out, a new writer who would like to become what you have become?
Get therapy. Try not to drink too much. All of the things that you think you know, you probably don't. And nobody's going to have the right answers for you because everybody's experiences are different. But there is only one rule for writing, and that is get it done. You can study all the technique in the world, you can know all the marketing in the world, but if you do not finish your stuff, you got nothing. So just write. Make sure you get that writing done.
Good advice. All right. Edith would like to know, do you use an editor or do you do your own editing?
For short stories, I sometimes do my own editing, but it's kind of a money thing with that. Like if I have the money, I will pay an editor because human brains hate us. Okay, our brains hate us, and I can prove it. There is psychological studies about this. Your brain will skip over things that you've made a mistake on because your brain knows what you meant.
Yes.
And no matter how good an editor you are, you're not going to see all your own stuff.
Yep.
You have to get another pair of eyes on it. You have to.
Yes.
So I even if it's just like some beta readers that I trust to catch most of the grammar and punctuation mistakes, I have to have somebody else lay eyes on it because, I'll skip over the same double word like 30 times. And then it's like, wait a second. And then you get the book in print and you can see all of them.
Of course.
Sucks. Oh my. But, on the other hand, at the same time, no matter how many edits you have done, whether they are professional, whether you do them yourselves, whether you have friends do them, no matter what, you're going to have an error in your book. Period. End of story. I mean, it's the curse of all writers.
That is true.
You're going to have an error. Don't stress about it too much. And I really, really don't like it when there are people who are like, there was this one part where they had 2 periods instead of 1 period, and it should have only been 1 period, and now I can't even read them. Like, dude, you've got issues at that point. Everybody's got errors. If you go back to like the 70s, 80s, 90s and pick up paperbacks, they all have an error in them. You will be able to find an error that's not, it's a thing. So don't stress too much, but make sure you get it as clean as possible.
Good advice.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to do it for your own stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Get an editor. I did find a trick. If you change the font of your story while you're editing, that helps some of the errors jump out at you.
Changing the font, reading it out loud, having somebody else read it out loud for you, and printing it out helps as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, there are tricks, but I mean, the thing is, you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. Just, find somebody who is like, especially like new editors who are just trying to break in. Be like, how much are you going to charge me for a proofread?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You could probably get away with, well, depending on the size, $20 to $120
mm-hmm.
for, being able to catch like 99% of the errors. That's a pretty good ratio right there.
Good advice. All right. Do you have an excerpt you would like to read for us tonight?
Oh, I don't. Maybe. Do I have a book? I don't.
You don't. All right. No worries. No worries.
You know what? I can pull one up though real quick.
That would be great.
I know. I'll read from the Switchblade Tattoo.
Okay, great.
This is my new short story that I just sent off for submission, and it is horrific. And the reason I say this is it's one of those stories that I didn't think it was going to be quite this dark, and it turned out really, really, really dark, like American X dark. I don't know how many people are going to get that reference, but yeah. So it's essentially about a woman who is in a skinhead neo-Nazi gang with the intention of trying to break them apart, and then there's magic. So,
Awesome.
So you ready for me to show it? Okay. I'll be back in a few hours, babe. You can stay and hang with the boys. Viv put her hand on Jax's arm, rubbing it. She had to get out of the bar. 3 guys had groped her without Jax noticing, and she was sick of hanging around watching the guys light up. Jax pulled her close, grinding into her. Viv hid the flinch as his breath, rancid from the meth, hit her nose. Fine, we'll just go fuck with some other apes. Be back in time for tonight. Viv smiled and nodded. You bet, wouldn't miss it. Crack some heads for me. Jax trailed his hand down her arm as she pulled away. She glanced back and wiggled her fingers at him before turning the corner. Once he was out of sight, her shoulders slumped and her stance relaxed. Her stride lengthened as her long legs ate up the blocks. She waited until she was a full block away before she pulled out her phone. First, she called Spelling Inc. and confirmed an opening. Then she shot off a series of texts, barely looking up from her phone long enough to keep from running into people. Most avoided her, taking their cue from her style. It didn't matter if they assumed if she was a skinhead or a punk. The look was almost identical, and for good reason. Most punks were former skinheads and violently anti-Nazi. Most skinheads took their cues from the anarchy of punk, directing their violence towards non-whites. Viv raised her head to glance up at the sign for the tattoo parlor. She turned into the narrow staircase leading up from the sidewalk, jumping over the broken 13th step. She pushed open the weather-swollen door and clumped over to the older woman inside. Candy pulled off the nitrile gloves covering up her inked-up fingers and grabbed Viv in a bear hug. Hey, Chica, how's it? Viv gave her a half shrug. It goes. Same old crap, different day. Candy nodded. She didn't have to say she understood. Viv knew the older woman had done the same thing Viv was doing now, joining a skinhead crew by way of screwing one of the boys and then ratting them out, blowing their cover stories, and doing everything she could to make them implode. Rumor had it Candy had driven one of the KKK Grand Wizards to kill his own son. She was legendary, and like Viv, she had an advantage. What you need today, Candy asked, gesturing Viv to sit in the chair. Viv smiled. I want the spell to burn shit to the ground. Candy bit her lip for a moment, then turned to the dial on the safe she had on her work table. She pulled out red, orange, and yellow tattoo inks. You've proven yourself ready for this kind of magic, but all the usual disclaimers apply. Viv nodded. Natch. She offered the back of her right wrist for the older witch's canvas. What's the chant? End scene.
Nice. Good job.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
And that's a short story?
It's a short story, yes.
Awesome. And that's one you're working on right now?
That is the one that I'm editing.
Okay.
So I've submitted it, and I'm doing a little tweaking of the deets because the publication that I submitted it to is one that I've worked with a lot before, and they actually expect you to do editing between submission and final cut. So that's just one of those things.
Awesome.
So yeah, but yeah, it's a little bit more hardcore. It's kind of gritty, and the anthology is for anti-heroes, so it fits very well in that.
All right. Edith wants to know, do you have a suggestion to find an editor, or who do you use for editing?
Actually, I about 4 years ago joined a chat group on Facebook that was a group of women authors who we just happened to work on the same project together, and we started chatting about, writing issues, and that grew and grew. And I recently left the group because I had some issues with some of the people, but a couple of the others, I made really close connections with, and some of them are editors. So I go through a couple of those, just see who has time for me at the moment. One of them is actually the one who owns the publishing group for the anthologies. And I really like working with her because she does 2 anthologies every year, and one of them is always a charity. So that's always nice.
That is nice. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Sarah. Next week, we will have Janet Subcheck. Janet is a special education teacher by day and an award-winning writer/poet at night. Her poetry and personal narratives have been published in 3 compilation books, 4 anthologies, a few magazines, as well as monthly in Your Country Neighbor, available in print and online, over 40 pieces in all. And Jen will be here next week, so don't forget to click subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and join us again next Thursday night. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.